Across the political spectrum, there's a good deal of agreement that Ontario requires substantial investments in transportation infrastructure. Highways, transit, and getting greener ways to move people and goods all appear in varying degrees in what the parties are promising. Joining us now to size up those plans, let's welcome from Valrita, Ontario, near Kapuskasing in northeastern Ontario, there's Joanne Baril, Mayor of the municipality of Valrita Harty and the President of the Northeastern Ontario Municipal Association. In Waterloo, Ontario, Jeff Casello, Professor of Transportation Planning and Engineering at the University of Waterloo. In Guelph, Ontario, Martin Collier, founder of Transport Futures. And in Corso Italia, in the provincial capital, Teresa Di Felice, Assistant Vice President of Government and Community Relations at CAA, South Central Ontario. And it's great to welcome at least three of you back to our program. And Your Worship, way up north, great to have you along as well. Teresa, to you first, how significant do you think transportation issues have been in this campaign so far?
I think they've basically dominated a lot of the conversation, both with the candidates, the parties, in the televised debates, despite what some of the polling will tell you in terms of what's on the minds of Ontarians.
Meaning we've heard a lot about affordability and healthcare and housing. So I guess I wonder, do you think transportation has gotten short shrift in the campaign?
Not at all. I think there's been a lot of conversation around transportation with the various party platforms related to whether it's transit, roads, operating funds for transit, capital, some different ideas around getting around Northern Ontario, electrification. So there is a lot of conversation. And I think part of that is that stimulus, check mark to sort of say we're going to get infrastructure happening in order to ensure economic stimulus is happening in the province.
Well, you mentioned the North, so let's go there. Your Worship, how much has transportation been a factor in what you're hearing about the provincial election campaign?
It is absolutely a huge factor in Northern Ontario. Unfortunately, the platforms don't really align with what the priorities are for Northerners. We're seeing that, yes, the Ontario Northland is on some platforms to reinstate that service. But unfortunately, we're not seeing any movement towards making highways 11 and 17 safer for both commercial truck drivers and residents as well.
Let me ask you a follow-up about the Northland or the train. Yeah, a bunch of them are promising it. Do you believe they're actually going to do it?
It's a plan. I think that their heart is in it. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, it is my opinion that it's not going to go forward.
Because?
I think it's the ridership is one issue. The Northlander is kind of like a milk train. It is slow. It will take in between Timmins and the GTA approximately 12 hours overnight to travel to Union Station. That will certainly make ridership lower. I think that as well, we're in a state where people these days we're spoiled. We're used to using our vehicles. We're used to getting there faster and having the flexibility to travel from one place to the other. So unless the price of gas goes up substantially, I think that we'll still want to take our own vehicles to travel to Southern Ontario.
I think a furry beast just made a cameo in the background of your shot, Your Worship. I think I saw that. Anyway, please welcome him or her to the broadcast at your convenience. Jeff, let's get you in here. How, in your view, has the pandemic changed the way that you look at transportation in the province? You've been on this program many times in the past talking about it, but I presume things are different post-pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. As we come out of the pandemic, we have been spending a lot of time thinking about how we get around. And certainly public transit during the pandemic has suffered. People are just, uncomfortable being in what we might call mass transportation. It just wasn't a really viable option during the public health emergency. But what's happened, Steve, is that we've seen really major growth in active transportation. So we've seen much more walking, much more cycling. This is just a way both to get out of the house during the lockdowns and so on. And people who have never experienced that as a way to commute or commuting from home are now seeing these modes as a much more viable alternative. So I think as we come out of the pandemic, it's going to require a major rethink. I hope we don't default back to the auto dominance that we've seen for decades now. I hope that active transportation will continue to be a viable opportunity for people who want to travel. And I hope that public transit, returns to its pre-pandemic levels and continues to grow.
Well, let me ask you about that, Jeff, in a follow-up here, because the levels of people, the numbers of people taking public transit these days are still off from what it was pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. Does that make you question whether it's wise to be spending the tens of billions of dollars on mass transit that are in, frankly, all of the parties' platforms?
Yeah, you know what, Steve, I think that the numbers are off, but I think the peak numbers are off because commute times are different now. We don't have the same volume of people who are traveling in those work hours from 7 to 9 a.m. and from 4 to 6 p.m. But I think if you look at off-peak values, I think that you would see actually a small increase in the transit ridership. And so I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I think that public transit is going to continue to be a really important transportation mode, a viable alternative. It's low cost, low impact, all of the really positive attributes that's made it part of the political platforms for so long. So I think we just have to take a breath, see what transit ridership looks like in a year or in 2 years when things get settled again. And I expect that it's going to continue. And I don't think it's a misstep by the political parties to have this as major platforms.
Gotcha. Martin, one of the reasons we wanted you here is that you host you host an all candidates debate about transportation issues with the major parties. But of course, I gather the Tories were a no-show for you, as they were for us throughout this campaign. So you had 3 of the 4 there anyway. And I'd love you just to give us your sort of general takeaway from what emerged from your debate.
Well, we had a great discussion, and already the other folks on this panel have sort of mentioned them. We looked at just about everything from, the traffic congestion to transit to infrastructure to the environmental impacts. Equity issues came up almost in every single question, whether, with Highway 413, is that $10 billion maybe it might be spent on that? And is that the right allocation of money when there are many other needs and priorities, both in transportation as well as in other issues like around education and the need for schools to be rehabilitated and those kinds of things? So there was, I guess, a lot of trying to sort of connect the dots between all the sort of different issues. And I guess for Transport Futures, anyways, what we've always been trying to say is, look at how can we use the existing system more efficiently, use the existing infrastructure more efficiently through pricing, through other demand management measures, so that we can actually get people to use the transit. So right now, I think they're looking at spending, at least the government, the incumbent government is looking at spending maybe up to $60 billion on transit, but can we get people into that? So into that transit that's going to be built in the future. But if we're also building $10 billion highways, and it's not just 413, there's highways in all the maybe not the Greens are the only one that don't have it, highways in their platform. But you can't be doing both at once. You have to focus on one. So I think we tried to cover that as well as in goods movement as well.
Right. Just to confirm, the 3 parties that showed up to your debate are all against building the 413, and did they convince you of the rightness of their path?
I think they definitely agreed with each other, and they didn't really have to convince me personally. I agree with that, but I think it's just how do we move forward, as well as looking at the transportation system across the province. And, up north, and, because there's a lot of money that could be used for other things. So, and like I said, the other parties do have highways in their platform. There's Highway 7 out here where I am in Guelph, between Kitchener and Guelph, and that's going to be another $1 billion just for 18 kilometers of highway there. So the other parties do agree with that. So the Greens were the only ones who might be in disagreement with that one.
Well, let's, all of the parties have had a great deal to say about transportation in this election campaign. They got a lot on their platforms, but we're going to just sort of summarize it with 3 bullet points per party. And we're just going to take a moment here to go through the 4 major parties in order of precedence from the last House. So, Sheldon, let's get going on this. Here's what the PCs have on offer as it relates to transportation promises. $25.1 billion for highway construction, that over a 10-year period. $61.6 billion over 10 years for public transit construction. And, as we discussed earlier, they promised to bring back passenger rail service for Northern Ontario, the Northerner. The NDP, let's see what they've got on offer. They would create a zero emissions vehicles strategy, transition to the public provision of winter road maintenance, and subsidize 50% of the operating costs of municipal transit systems province-wide. The Liberals, you have certainly heard a lot about this first promise, cut transit fares to $1 a ride until 2024. That's the so-called buck a ride province-wide. They would expand GO Transit and the electrification thereof. And they also have a provision for high-frequency rail in their platform. And the Greens, as Martin just suggested, yes, stop building new highways is point number 1. Create dedicated truck lanes on Highway 407 and support regional fare integration. And yes, all 3 parties are against, the 3 progressive parties, that is, are against building the 413. The PCs would be the only ones in favor of that. Okay, let's get some feedback on this. Teresa, what do you like about what you just heard?
I think there's some really good conversation happening around transit. It sounds funny to hear from the Canadian Automobile Association.
I was just going to say, you're the Automobile Association. What are you doing plugging transit here?
Yeah, I think for us, it's about, however, it's about the mobility of how people get around. Our members are not just car drivers, they're transit drivers. They walk, they go on bicycles. So, and we've actually, had a seat at the table, even with the previous government on the transit investment strategy. So what's the big thing that everyone needs to talk about is we've underfunded transit for a really long time. These are some significant investments in transit, especially in the capital build. Of course, the conversation always leads to who's going to pay to operate it. You can build it, but how's it going to get, how's it going to run? And the thing is, that is a challenge. But in terms of the growth that is expected in the GTHA and other parts of the province, we do actually need the infrastructure because we can't move everybody in cars. And so we're going to have those options. And I think some of the other concepts that have arisen to date struggle because there aren't viable options to make it convenient to travel by transit.
Can I assume you're pro Highway 413 construction?
No, you can't assume that.
That's why I'm asking.
Actually, we're not taking a position on the highway builds. It's not in our wheelhouse to sort of pick and choose projects. There's a lot of conversation happening. I think for us, it's what's safe, what is actually going to get people moving in the most efficient ways. How do we I agree with a lot of the other panelists in that we need to maximize what we have. But I will say some of our reports have indicated that there are times where you do need to build in order to address current demand if supply isn't enough, as well as forecasting for the future.
Okay, Mayor Barry, as you look at it, those 4 transit options, what do you see that you like?
Well, the parties are proposing new highways and new lanes in Southern Ontario, but the party platforms, in my opinion, should focus on building and maintaining highways 11 and 17 to support heavy commercial vehicle transportation. The NDP are proposing upgrading winter road clearing standards, and also there's a pilot that's being proposed for a 2+1 short section of the highway. But that just won't cut it. Training and rest areas and patrolling and inspections and integrating GPS technology, the list is quite exhaustive of what we need in Northern Ontario. For example, our community hosted evacuees for Kashechewan First Nation just a few weeks ago. Reconciliation is part of our strategic plan, our little teeny weeny little Valrita Hardy, a town of just a little over 800 people. We take reconciliation seriously. I was very disappointed when I read the platforms. For Northern Ontario remote communities, winter roads and air transportation, they're vital lifelines for fuel and basic amenities and access to education and health. So no mention of northern communities was really disappointing for us.
Do you find that surprising, given that the Conservatives have 3 cabinet ministers from north of the French River?
Yes, I do find it surprising, but I don't think it's what the voters want to hear. I think they want to hear about new builds and widening of roads. But, for more than 1,500 kilometers, the trip to market for Northern Ontario roads, we move critical raw materials essentially to every sector of Ontario's economy. We create high-paying jobs in Southern Ontario to make cars and computers and appliances and concrete roads and, my gosh, electric transmission lines. So, building and maintaining highways 11 and 17 has to accommodate heavy commercial vehicle transportation. We're finding that seasoned professional drivers that are driving these big rigs have decided to change jobs. They've decided to change trades altogether because they're finding that highways 11 and 17 are too dangerous. We're getting new drivers coming in with little training and no experience on a single lane highway transporting these goods to Southern Ontario. And we've had terrible accidents and loss of life. And kids don't want to take the roads anymore to go to school. Parents don't want their kids to take the roads to go to school. So there is a lot involved with highways 11 and 17 to get goods to market.
It is odd that nothing has happened on that file, particularly Highway 11, given that it goes right through North Bay, which is Vic Fideli's riding. He's one of the senior-most cabinet ministers in that government. Okay, we just put that on the record for what it's worth. Jeff, you saw the 4 platforms. What do you like?
Well, Steve, I think that first, let me tell you what I don't like. I think Highway 413 is an absolute disaster for the province. I just feel like, we are probably the only major government structure globally that are thinking about investing that level of monies into the infrastructure. And as other panelists have talked about, there's a huge opportunity cost associated with what we would spend. $25 billion could certainly improve the Northlander, it could certainly improve transit, it could certainly improve active transportation. So I think that's probably the most important thing that people should think about as they look at the transportation platforms. I very much like the investment in the physical infrastructure for public transportation. I think the PC's heavy investment in the GTA and the expansion of the GO system, the upgrade of the GO system, this makes a lot of sense to me. I do think that the PCs need to think about it, and I think Martin would agree that we need to think about new revenue sources as ways to pay for this massive highway instruction that pushes down a bit more the user fees associated with using highways. We can't continue to publicly subsidize highways at the levels that we've been doing so for the last decade. So, I'm happy to see the continued investment in public transportation. I'm happy to see the Greens' emphasis on Vision Zero. That's an important outcome, safety for our pedestrians and cyclists in our urban centers. But I think the 413 is really problematic.
Well, Martin, in fact, the Conservatives are proposing to take the tolls off some of those current pay highways. What do you think of that idea, and what else you've heard here?
Well, on that, they've already taken them off the 412 and 418. I think that was a big mistake. That's to build those highways, just the 2 of them, which is maybe 12 kilometers in total, it's like $1.5 billion, and it was supposed to be paid off over 30 years by the drivers who benefited from that highway, but instead people from the north and east and south are subsidizing them now. And those highways actually would never even been built had it not been for the P3 model that they had. That would have taken another 25, 30 years to be built. So anyway, that's a huge mistake. I think on the other things, it's whether they are putting about 60 billion or so, you said, into transit projects. But, about 28 billion of that's just going to the 4 in Toronto. And are those actually even the best projects? So there's whether they had to build, a subway out to Pearson, the LRT out to Pearson, which will be partly tunneled, and the cost of doing that. There's so many ways we could have done it to actually save money, still get transit out there. But so it's just how they do the projects, whether they're doing it in the most efficient way to free up money. But it seems that money is not a problem when it comes to transportation. It's incredible that we could do so much more. In terms of the Liberal platform. I think that the Buck a Ride, it's a nice branding thing. But I guess what I'm concerned about is people have all sorts of different income levels, and most people can actually afford the $3 fare. And so you have to target that. If you're going to have Buck a Ride, target it to the low income folks who, the frontline workers who have to take transit, because most people just want a reliable transit system, a system that comes, every 10 to 15 minutes, and they know the transit's going to be there as opposed to waiting for an hour. So I think that's kind of a crazy thing, and I don't know what they're going to do in 2 years. Are they going to be able to take that off? And so that's the same thing. I think most of the parties, except for the Greens, like the idea of reducing the gas tax, by 5.7 cents until the end of the year. But I just don't see how, once they've done that, no matter which party gets in, how they're going to all of a sudden increase it, because by the end of the year, inflation's even going to be worse than it is now. Like, the gas prices are going to be higher. So I don't know how they're going to all of a sudden say, okay, now we're going to take that 5.7 cents and put it back on again. So I don't agree with that. I think the Greens definitely have the best idea in terms of highways, saying no more highways. And like Jeff said, the Vision Zero, they've really connected the dots with climate change in the north. As the temperatures increase, those roads in the wintertime are actually going to get more dangerous, because you're going to get sort of the freeze thaw and sort of ice building at that sort of level of temperature. And so the Greens are actually considering that aspect too. And that's another reason why those existing highways have to be upgraded. And I would say they should also be priced, so the people who can have other means of getting around, or maybe teleworking, don't have to be out there, so the goods can get to market.
Okay, I want to pick up on Buck a Ride province-wide, because I saw Jeff shaking his head when you said what you said, Martin. And to that end, Jeff, the Liberals in their plan are budgeting, I think, basically $1.7 billion for 2 years. The idea being, if we make riding public transit cheap enough, those who are sort of hesitant about getting back on it will give it a try, like it a lot, stay on it, and then I guess in the third year, the Liberals would figure out whether they're going to put the prices back to normal or subsidize it further or what. You're shaking your head, meaning, at least I inferred from that you're not really sold on this.
No, I don't think it's a very good idea, Steve. I'll tell you why. I think that the price of riding public transit is not often the barrier to using public transit. The quality, the reliability, the connectivity, the frequency of the service, those are the things that matter the most. And I think Martin said it really well. Many of us can afford to pay for our transit passes per month. There are targeted ways to help those for whom the cost of transit is the barrier to using public transport. But I think that this is a populist message that is trying to mimic the PC's Buck a Beer, Buck a Ride. These are very simple messages that the campaign is trying to promote, and I don't think it will have the impact. In fact, I think the platform talks about generating 400,000 new rides with a reduction in fares. And every formal elasticity study, which measures the change in demand as a change in price, suggests that we are very inelastic to prices for public transit, meaning you can change the price a lot and you won't see a lot of difference in the ridership.
Your Worship, I want to ask you about electric vehicles, because, of course, all of the parties have had something to say about that. We didn't have it in our graphics earlier, but the fact is 3 of the 4 parties, the 3 so-called progressive parties, are offering significant subsidies to encourage people to buy electric vehicles. The Conservatives have put massive subsidies into building EV facilities, recharging stations, battery manufacturing plants in the province. Yep. This is after, of course, ripping all the charging stations out when they first came into power, but that's another story. My question is, well, let me put it this way. I drive a Chevy Volt. It gets 60 kilometers of battery power in the summer and about 35 in the winter. So needless to say, I want to ask you about Northern Ontario and how much you think EVs would work in a place where it gets very cold.
Well, cold weather, it cuts EV range by over 40% when the heater's on. So, buyers of EVs who live in Northern Ontario have to get a car with a range that's about double what their daily driving needs are, so that they're not left stranded in the cold. I see more potential for electric cars for travel within northern communities rather than in between them. But EV charging infrastructure needs to come first. And currently there's no plan by Hydro One and LPG, who own the EV charging network, to build more stations along highways 11 and 17.
So you need to see a lot more progress on that infrastructure before you're prepared to back EVs for the north. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Okay. Teresa, how about for you on that? Are EVs the panacea that certainly all four parties are suggesting they will be to our future?
I think we have to be ready for it. I think people are interested, but they're still holding a lot of stigma from the first round of EVs, and maybe your Chevy Volt, as you said. Like, EVs have come a long way in terms of range. You can get a lot more charge than you could a number of years ago. Battery isn't the same issue, or the length of the battery life isn't what it was or what was believed when they first came out. I agree with the mayor that charging infrastructure is huge, and unlocking the materials to really actually help the technology evolve.
Yep.
We're seeing, a lot of interest in terms of knowledge about electric vehicles and understanding what's out there. People are, especially with gas prices being what they are, and that's not expected to change in the foreseeable future. In terms of the electorate, some of the data that we have suggests that it's not high on people's minds in terms of a response to, other issues around climate change and things like that. But it's there, just not as popular as some of the other topics that they want to hear about.
Jeff, I want to get your take on that in this regard. Obviously, if you can replace all the internal combustion engines on the road with electric vehicles, you're doing a heck of a lot to help with pollution. On the other hand, you're not doing a heck of a lot to reduce the need to build more highways or sprawl. So how do you figure out that equation in your world?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work looking at this. The academic community has done a lot of work looking at this. And really, Steve, it is right that during operation, you're not producing any pollution out of your electric vehicle. And that's certainly a benefit because you're operating in high density areas, air quality is much better. But the carbon footprint of the battery, the carbon footprint of the whole vehicle, the carbon footprint of the infrastructure that you're driving on is as bad, and maybe in some cases even worse, than internal combustion engines, depending on the battery technology and the source of the minerals and the whole life cycle of this. So for me, what the EV movement is really doing is it's allowing people to maintain their existing lifestyle, their existing reliance on automobiles, and not changing at all their behavior to try and achieve sustainability goals. And I get it that it's really attractive for Ontario because of all the manufacturing that also happens here. So if we can build battery technology, if we can build infrastructure charging stations, if we can build EVs, that's going to really resonate with the electorate because the voters are going to see new jobs, new economy building things. But ultimately, EVs I'm really skeptical about their overall impact on improving our sustainability of our transportation system.
We're making a multi-billion-dollar bet on the opposite. You concerned about that?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. I think that there are certainly places, like I can imagine Highway 401 with every freight vehicle, and it's easier for these folks to do it, who all the tractor trailers would be electric powered. Now that would be impactful because the diesel that they're using is problematic, and these are really high volume and high fuel consuming. And so this would be a place, and because they're fleets, they can be managed much more easily. But for individuals, this is, even if EVs become completely pervasive in society, I don't think we've solved our transportation problem. And I think the bet that the province is making and all party platforms are making it's a pretty risky one. I wouldn't support it.
Okay. Martin, we've talked a great deal right now about public transportation and about driving. And I want to ask about other ways of getting around, namely cycling and walking. Do you see enough in the major party platforms that address that issue?
Just about zero. In most of the party platforms, I think the Greens have been talking about. I saw something the other day about where they're going to support municipalities to sort of green space, but they were talking, I think, more about sort of greening sort of parking lots and off-road things. But I was thinking if they could also focus a little bit on the right of way and greening the right of way, just to make it nicer to walk, a nicer environment, add trees, narrow roads where you can, to provide more space for biking. And I was mentioning to one of the producers there yesterday that I have a street, and it's actually right behind me on this map, that called Speedvale in Guelph, and they could have redesigned that road for about $7 million back in 2013. They said it was going to be built in 2017, and today it's still not built. and it's up to about 25 million just for 1 kilometer, and they're widening it, and they've actually cut down 40 beautiful trees and obviously impacted property values along there. So these are the kinds of things that could be done, but I don't see anything like that being done in any of the platforms, really. If I could just talk about the EVs just for 1 second, one thing that I'm most concerned about is what happens with the gas tax. If we're cutting it by 5.7 cents, and as I said, I think that's going to continue, and then electric vehicles come along which actually don't pay any gas tax, what's going to happen to some of the money that goes to transit and to road infrastructure that comes from that? And so this is another place where I get on my bandwagon to get about road pricing. Places like Oregon, California, Virginia, even the UK is looking at what does this mean for total revenues over time as electric vehicle fleet is pervasive. And so we got to look at another revenue tool to do that. And obviously the road usage charges where people pay, I calculated in Ontario, would be probably about 3 cents a kilometer to actually, wherever you are, whether it's a highway or a municipal road, even a dirt road, you'd actually be paying something for a kilometer that you've driven. And that money can be allocated to those municipalities to maintain and upkeep their roads and build if you have to. But I'm sure with pricing, we're not going to have to build or expand any roads anymore because people are going to start taking transit and biking and walking more.
We've got just a little over a couple of minutes left here, and I wanted to ask Mayor Barry, if you got whoever the next premier is after June the 2nd, buttonholed in a conference somewhere in the corner and had 2 minutes to make a pitch to whoever that is on what you want, okay, what's at the top of your list?
Build up the northern corridor that supports Canada's wealthiest province. We have the most mature and diversified industrial economy. And the road to recovery for the entire province, rather than building more roads in southern Ontario to get more cars on the road, we should have a strategy to get the cars off the road. And public transit definitely is one of the key issues. E-transit, I believe, is perhaps one of the things that we should be looking at, but we have to look more closely into LNG and CNG technologies as well, because there are some fleets moving to that technology, which is actually cleaner. But I would say invest in northern roads.
Jeff, you got 30 seconds at the same conference with the same premier. What are you going to tell him or her?
I think, Steve, we have to consider transportation as part of the holistic planning for our province. You talked about coming out of the pandemic, and we talked about unaffordability of housing, about equity, about healthcare. But transportation influences all of these things. If you're in a place where you can easily travel at low cost, low impact modes, then you can access healthcare, you can access low priced housing, and so on. So don't think about these things in isolation, but think of them holistically as a system, and think about how we move people from the north and goods from the north. And the way that you do that is you ask people to pay their fair share. And I agree with Martin on road pricing is incredibly important. You allocate that money to make sure that there are viable alternatives so that people can have these choices. You make walking and cycling safe, and you have to think about it holistically. You can't simply put all of your eggs in a single basket and say that's the solution.
Gotcha.
Bravo.
From left to right, top to bottom, Mayor Jo-Anne Barry, Jeff Casello, University of Waterloo, Martin Collier, Transport Futures, Teresa Di Felice, CAA, South Central Ontario. Good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.